Has any Redditor been kidnapped? If yes, what is your story? I lived in Cambodia. I was at the local market with my then 2-year-old daughter. I turned around and she was gone. I was in a complete panic, rushing around searching for her. I had to pay to local police $200 to do their job. That's how it was back then. My daughter turned up at the border. The person who took her was trying to take her out of the country. The only reason she was noticed was because she had a distinctive yellow t-shirt on. This was 13 years ago. She wasn't traumatized by the event. Thankfully, she was too young to remember. The man who took her got sent to prison for 15 years. That's the last we heard of him. I was almost kidnapped once. I was visiting the mall with some others and left alone to go to the bathroom, which was down a long isolated hallway. When I came out of the women's bathroom, a dirty old man rushed out of the men's and pinned me up against the wall. There was an emergency exit at the end of the hallway and he was dragging me toward it when another dude came out of the bathroom. He was big and bald and looked like a biker, complete with vest. He yelled "Hey," and the old man dropped me and ran. I was 15 I was kidnapped when I was younger, but I didn't realize it at the time. My uncle and my aunt were going through a divorce, and he was staying at our house with my cousin. One day he said we were going on a trip. I was young, and I loved going on trips, so I didn't think anything of it. He took us from Connecticut to Minnesota, and we stayed there for a few days. What I didn't know was he was about to lose custody of my cousin, so he took us and ran. I think he also took me just because I was there and he didn't want to leave me home alone. He was arrested shortly afterwards and sadly he killed himself in jail. A friend of mine, not me. So my pal goes to Bolivia every year and always tries to convince us to come with him. We never do because he casually mentions to bring kidnap money with us. Long story short, coke is dirt cheap in the rural area his family lives. A background of drinks at certain bars will come with 2/3 grams of complimentary coke. And he loves the white stuff. Anyway, every year he goes he gets kidnapped. They treat him good, no harm, gets a semi-decent meal etc. And the ransom is like £150 or something equally irrelevant. Apparently they once accepted £50 for his release. My friend was almost kidnapped once. She had found some people online she wanted to meet. After much debate I agreed to go with her to meet them in a park. Since I had a bad feeling I brought my dog with me, just as a little security measure. They gave my friend alcohol, but didn't drink themselves. After hanging out with them for a while I decided it was time to go. We started walking towards one way and they walked towards the opposite way to their friend, who had came in a van to pick them up. They call out for my friend to come and meet their friend. Drunk and stupid as she was, she hurries over there, and the driver grabs her arm and tries to pull her into the car. She is resisting, so he dropped his grip on her, and she falls back on the ground. It happened very fast, and I was far away from them. So I took off the leash from my dog, and took hold on the collar, and got him all excited. My dog is growling and pulling against them by now, and I scream that I will send the dog on them if they don't stop. They open the back of the van and tries to grab her again. Then I let my dog loose. My scary looking dog ran growling at full speed against them, and then they let her go and jumped in the car and drove away. She was lucky that I brought my kind of unstable dog that day. I was kidnapped as a child by my stepfather. Don't remember much of the details, I just remember being told that it was quite a big deal in my small town. I was only returned when my stepfather was given 100,000 Australian dollars. Almost kidnapped in CA when I was 5. My cousins and I were playing in the front yard and 2 guys drove up. The passenger said, "Hey kids, wanna go for a ride?" He talked, the driver got out and approached us. All I remember now is the mix of confusion and fear, and don't talk to strangers. Luckily my dad walked out to see what was going on, and they took off. There were reports of 2 men in an 80s model Suburban that apparently kidnapped a 12-year-old girl down the street. That last part was something my mom always told me, but she also had a knack for lying to scare me straight into the arms of Jesus. So, who knows? Almost, although I didn't realize it until way later. My parents both worked a lot and so I had a nanny basically to pick me up from school. One day she didn't show. but some dude I'd never seen before did and was asking around trying to find me, saying that she'd been injured and sent him to take me home. I'd never seen him before, and he had no idea who he was looking for. 100% sure in retrospect that I'd have been kidnapped if I'd gone with him. When I was around 7 to 8 years old, my mom took me to a karate lesson for the first time. The dojo was in a strip mall. The lesson ended, and as I was leaving the room, for whatever reason I was the last one out, a man approached me asking if I enjoyed the lesson. I told him I did, and asked if he was a friend of my mom. He was dressed normally, not an instructor, and didn't have a kid with him, so I was confused as to his interest in me. He told me he was not a friend of my mom's, but that he and I would be friends. He put his arm around my shoulder and started walking towards the front door. As we approached the exit, I saw my mom chatting with the instructor in his office through the small window on the door. The office was right next to the exit and the handle within reaching distance. I quickly reached for the door handle, turned, and pushed. The man left my side and walked out the front door before the door to the office fully swung open. I walked in, and the instructor / my mom start asking about the lesson, if I enjoyed it, etc. As we talked, I asked about the man. Neither the instructor or my mom seemed to know who I was talking about, and shrugged it off. After we left, I told my mom it wasn't for me, and never went back. It wasn't until a decade later, when I finally grasped the possibility of the situation. Not me. My public speaking teacher was telling us how she had another class do a 5 minimum speech on something important in their lives. Most were boring ass presentations, mostly hobbies or a weird vacation in Cuba. Then a guy finishes his presentation with, and that's when the FBI showed up and rescued me, because the people vacationing with me were not. In fact, my family, they were drug dealers who'd kidnapped me from my home, smuggled me to Cuba, and were demanding X amount of millions of dollars for my safe return. I witnessed a kidnapping once. I was about 3.5 years old at the time. My mom dropped me off with this old lady, we'll call her Mrs. P, for daycare. Mrs. P was the sweetest old lady. Her husband was a cop and was out working the day shift. Apparently, they had a daughter who went on a bad path, got into drugs, and had a dirtbag boyfriend. They had a kid together, but Mrs. P ended up with custody. One day, the daughter and boyfriend show up. Mrs. P locks the door. The boyfriend breaks through the glass storm door and they enter the house. The boyfriend pushes Mrs. P in a chair and holds her down while the daughter grabs the kid, and they run out of the house. Cops show up 30 minutes later, and there's a whole crime scene, glass everywhere. Even though I was 3, I remember it in vivid detail. Another little girl and I decided to hide under the bed in Mrs. P's bedroom for the rest of the day. Not me, but my roommate at the time. We lived in Johannesburg and studied at the local university. One day I'm at class, and he is at home. He steps outside to get something from his car. It's a typical subblock of flats with tall walls and a motorized steel gate. Some guy climbs over the gate, runs up to him, and throws him inside the house, demands he gets the house keys and drags him outside to his car that was waiting on the street. He then takes my friend on a trip around Johannesburg, collecting debts owed to him. Can only imagine he is a drug dealer. After a good 6 hours of driving around, my friend is now scared shitless. The guy takes him home, drives into the driveway, strolls into the house, and locks him in his room while he casually takes a shower. He comes back out and steals everything from my friend, clothes and all, makes himself a sandwich and leaves like nothing happened. My friend is still traumatized, and this happened around 5 years ago. Lesson to learn. Always keep your house locked, even if you have fancy security, electric fences and all that jazz. Sometimes this country amazes me. A scare only. We were at a baseball game on a hot sunny day. My daughter was about 4 and was getting sick/faint from the heat. The wife took her to sit in an isolated shady seat. No one except one guy about 10 rows ahead, and left her to get something to drink. When she came back, the guy had moved to the same row and was moving towards my daughter, only a few seats away. He hurriedly turned around and was gone in a few seconds. Freshman year of college, I was struggling to send money home and in desperation, became a sugar baby per se. The psychiatrist I was with this one night said we were going to his home that was close by. He was a fan of smoking weed, and so through the haze I realized we were driving away from my city, and in my panic I asked why we were going so far. He didn't answer, and for a solid 5 minutes he ignored me and drive fast further away. It was the middle of the night and I just had my phone on me. As we were pulling into a very dark forest area I told him my friend has my location and that is he didn't drive me back she would call the police. I was stoned and scared and had to do everything to not show weakness to this man. I got home safely and threw up.